Hello everybody, and this is my wife, Jessica Boss.
Hello.
Also an accomplished filmmaker, actress at heart, but you just produced and wrote and directed and acted in your own feature film, Unnamed.
Yes.
Yes, very great accomplishment. But today we're here to just talk about writing, and
Okay.
I thought of about 5 questions that I would like to ask you, and you tell our people what your opinion are. So the first question would be, what advice would you give to screenwriters with little experience who want to write their first script for 1 or 2 location movie?
So my advice, it's gonna sound super cliche, but you gotta start. I think that's the most important thing, is you've gotta just make the decision that you're gonna do it and hold yourself accountable to it, because I think starting is the hardest part of any venture that you undertake. For a more practical piece of advice for a 1 to 2 location, I would start thinking about what type of assets you might have. For example, do you know somebody where you can shoot in their home, or do you have certain things? Some people have access to a farm, or their family owns a big estate. Think about the assets you've got and that you have access to, because that's very important. And if you can maybe either build your story around that, or if your story could incorporate that element in it, even better, because then you save on the location. So that's a huge thing that will come in very handy, to just have a location taken care of.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Determine that you start and follow through, and the location, that's a big one. Yeah. So that's good advice. Okay, so the second question would be, how would you go about finding a story for a 1 to 2 location script?
So the way I would approach finding a story for a 1 to 2 location is, if you're not already a writer, let's say if you're a writer, if you can challenge yourself and write a 1 to 2 location story, that would be awesome, because then you really can write your vision. You don't have to wait on anybody. Perfect. Now, if you're not a writer and you're wanting to do a creative venture, make a film, 1 to 2 locations, I would suggest go to writer friends that you might know. You never know who has a script that they just want to give to somebody else to produce, because sometimes writers just want to see their work produced, and they might be willing to give it for, or option it for $1.
Symbolic fee.
Symbolic fee. They might be willing to just give it to you just so that they can see their work done. But there's other resources such as the Blacklist. They have, I think you can find writers on there. You can find writers on LinkedIn. You can probably even find writers on Craigslist. So, and it's not expensive. It's not as though you have to pony up the WGA fee of, I think, $50,000 at this point to get a writer. You can find people for independent movies, and they're more than happy to work with you.
Yeah, that's interesting advice. I didn't even think of it, because this whole course is pretty much about you writing your own script. But you're right, you can go and find a script too. That's definitely advice that could work. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, number 3. What's the most challenging part for you in writing a script, and how do you overcome it?
For me, the most challenging part is starting it, to be honest. I think it can feel overwhelming to have an idea and you don't quite know how to structure it. But the way, and it's especially when you get the writer's block, sometimes you just sit at the computer and you're just looking at a blank screen and you just don't know what to do. But I overcome it I write out of sequence. You actually taught me this. So I don't write from the beginning to the end. I write the scene I see first. I obviously had some sort of idea of why I wanted to make this story. So what what scene do I know I want to write? Maybe I know the ending. I write the ending first, and then I put it away. And then I might have a different scene that, oh, that'd be interesting to do this kind of a scene. I write that scene, I put it away. When I've compiled about 15 to 20 different scenes, and I put them all in a folder on my computer, when I see, okay, I've had about 15, 20 scenes, then I start to put the story together, and then I read it through, and I find out where the holes are. And then before you know it, you're thinking, oh, I need a scene that establishes this person. I need a scene that does this. And I'm oversimplifying because I actually do make an outline whenever I approach writing. And that's also another challenge for me, is making an outline. Because again, I'm just sitting at the computer. I'm like, okay, what do? I don't know what to do. But having some sort of direction helps. And so, yeah, that's how I overcome all of that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I definitely touched on that subject of writing out a sequence or having a synopsis first or an outline. I touch on those subjects. So that's very good to hear that, again, to reinforce those principles. Okay.
We didn't even practice this.
Yeah, no. Now, maybe this next question, the second last question, ties in a little bit what you just said, but what is the best advice that you have personally received?
Well, I would say your advice was probably the best advice I've ever received.
Well, thank you.
Yes, write out of sequence. I know I already said that, but something I'll throw in a little extra. So when he told me, don't try to write from the beginning to the end, because that's where I was getting stuck, was trying to make logical sense of the story, not knowing what direction the story was going to take. But writing out of sequence gets me out of my head. It keeps me from feeling as though I need to write a certain scene, because I think scenes will come, and as we're experiencing life, something might happen in your day-to-day that you think, oh, that would be interesting. That's just like this character. And so you're putting in these elements that you would never have thought about. So it's a good way to give you a little bit more flexibility and not feel so rigid with writing. Because sometimes writing can feel like a task. At least for me it does. I mean, for you, maybe not so much. He can literally sit at a computer for 12 hours writing and then have a solid screenplay finished in 2 weeks that's ready to shoot. Me, I'm like sitting at the computer, and then I'm like, I'm hungry. Let me go check the fridge. And then I sit back down after I ate, and I'm like, you know what? Let me just check my email real quick. There's always distractions, but when you're more excited about what you actually want to write, you don't have to write it in any particular order. I think it makes the writing a lot easier and simpler.
Yeah, I think that is 100% correct. So, last question, what would you say to motivate screenwriters?
Okay, if I was going to motivate screenwriters, I would say that your stories, the things you've gone through, your life experiences, they happened for a reason. Maybe you're not privy to that reason, but there's something in what we go through that other people will relate to. So, share your story. Don't be afraid to share your story. Your story might be good for a 1 to 2 location movie, or it might be a big budget movie. And if that's the case, you can save that story for a later time, but don't be afraid to share your story, to share your voice. I know it can seem a little isolating sometimes to write because you are the writer, whereas other art forms you collaborate, such as dance. A lot of times you dance with other people. As a writer, you're writing by yourself. But I would say, don't be afraid to share your story, and just to start. Nothing is set in stone. That's the beauty. I think that's the real advice. Nothing is set in stone. So even if it seems silly or pointless or whatever the case is, just write it down. You can always cut it off the page. No one will ever know it was there. We literally cut stuff out of our feature film scenes, whole scenes. I think it would have been a lot more, a lot wiser to have cut it first on the page. So don't be afraid to write, and don't be afraid to cut out things either. I think that's another piece of advice that sometimes people hold too preciously to something like, oh, this has to be in. Make sure that it's serving the story and that it is, it's moving the story forward. And if it's not, leave it on the cutting room floor. It's going to be less expensive that way.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of nuggets in what you just said, from finding something you really actually want to tell the people, and that is a big motivator to write the script, because you have something to say, so you have to find something you have to say. And then also, for some people it helps to visualize having the finished script and then starting the casting and organizing the shoot, and then actually visualizing when the movie is done and you go to a screening and see it on the big screen. I know that's a little bit further down the road, but if you can visualize that and it excites you so much, then you're more willing to sit down and write. But all the stuff you said fits right in there, so thank you so much. If there is anything else you want to say, now would be the moment. Otherwise we say goodbye.
Let me see if I have one last nugget. Let's see. So I was not a writer. I did not start off writing. I wasn't pursuing writing at all. So if it's any encouragement, you don't have to have gone to film school or studied writing. It definitely helps. And you know, especially if you know you want to be a writer, it doesn't hurt to pick up a couple of books from some of those famous authors, such as, I think, Save the Cat, and there's books on screenwriting that are well known. Don't be afraid to pick those books up, but I would actually say just get your ideas on paper first, and then learn the rules, because I think that it is necessary for you to know the rules, but don't let that be a hindrance block from expressing your creative voice and writing. I think sometimes those books, they're fantastic, but they can sort of make you go, I'm not ready to start writing, I'm not good enough, I'm not a writer. Just write, you know, I think as simple as that. And then learn the rules. You can always rewrite. It took me probably a year, of like 2 months to write the first draft and another year to rewrite. And that's part of the writer's process too, is rewriting, and then hopefully sharing it with other people who can give you feedback, and then going back and rewriting. And you know, so it's part of the work. But don't let the rules scare you, but do learn the rules. Just make sure you're writing and you're not letting it become the excuse for you not to write.
Yeah, that is very, very good about reading screenwriting books. I'm glad I started writing first and then I read the screenwriting books, because sometimes it sounds so complicated, so complex with the storyline and the subplot and all that stuff. You think like, oh my God, I'll never be able to do that. So very good advice. And also you can find a lot of screenplays for free on the internet. So read other people's scripts and then you get the hang of it, and then you squeeze out yours. So thank you so much for being here, and good luck with your writing endeavors. Bye-bye.